largest privately held hazardous waste management company in the United States. We've been operating here since 1980. Construction of this facility began in 1980, began operations in 1981. This facility operates under the most stringent environmental laws on the books in the country. The Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act was passed in 1976, was heavily amended in 1984, and it governs the management of waste like what's been being generated at the site in East Palestine, Ohio. The facility is regulated and inspected regularly by the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and also the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And we also operate under the most stringent of environmental permits you could possibly have. We are planning to receive material from the East Palestine location. The material destined to come here is soil that's contaminated with low levels of butyl acrylate. It's a very common chemical. It's found in caulk, sealants, paints. The material also has extremely low levels of the vinyl chloride that I think you all have heard about. That probably got the most attention at that location. It is well below the levels at which we are allowed to receive material. So for example, the regulatory level is 6 parts per million that you're allowed to receive here at the landfill. That material that we're receiving is coming out at about 0.033 parts per million. So just for some context, and you guys look this up, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 1 part per million is the equivalent of a cup of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, just to give you some context. So we are 2 orders of magnitude below that level. I can turn it over to the gentleman behind me to talk a little bit about the construction and the details of the landfill. There are plenty of safeguards there. It's one of the most heavily regulated pieces of property in the United States and one of the safest waste management facilities going.
Can you repeat the type of soil that you said, material that's coming here once again?
Yeah, it's soil that's contaminated with butyl acrylate.
So Eric Chris, I'm the facility manager. To kind of go over the construction of our landfill, of course, Ali mentioned it's heavily regulated by the federal and state governments. So the system itself is a double line system with leak detection in between each layer of protective liner. So any rain or materials that would percolate through is all collected on site and then shipped off to be disposed of at another facility. We do have monitoring wells throughout the facility, and we monitor those on a periodic basis based on our permits to make sure there's no type of leakage out of the system into the environment. So facilities like this are very important because before we had facilities, disposal facilities, companies were leaching materials into waterways that could harm human health and the environment, and that's why we have a facility like this, is to prevent that type of situation.
Yep. I was just out there at the site, and there is kind of, I don't know, characterize it as a babbling brook, but there's a babbling brook right, like on the main roadway. Is that one of the waterways that you guys test? So any water that might run off of the facility is being tested on a regular basis?
We have ground water monitoring wells that are in the ground, so it's as the water flows in and out of underneath the facility, so we're monitoring upstream and downstream to make sure there's no contaminants leaving the facility.
Would that be for any contaminants that might get into, like, is there an aquifer underneath the facility?
Not that I know of.
Are any additional precautions be taking in place to monitor once that contaminated waste is going to be here in Indiana?
We'll still follow our established permit with the state and federal governments when it pertains to monitoring at the facility.
Do you know approximately how much?
The waste stream profile that I've seen, they listed about 2,000 tons.
And for people who don't understand, how many truckloads is that?
Approximately 100 truckloads.
Are those already arriving?
No, we have not received. We're still going through the process of testing and looking at the approval process before we receive the waste.
Yeah, so the way that process works is the people who generate the material will test that material, provide us with a profile of it, and then incoming material, we have a pretty robust waste acceptance plan. We have several steps we have to go through before we accept the material. So there are a lot of built-in layers of protection in this entire system.
So when will the community know if this has been, if you guys are able to accept this material?
It would probably be within the next day or two, if not sooner.
And then can you spell your name for us, please?
It's ERICCHRIS.
And then there was mention of if the testing does work out and you guys decide to take the material, that there would be community meetings to kind of explain that process. Is that still in the works?
We're talking with the town of Rochdale to help. We offered to have a town meeting just because to make sure the citizens in that community feel comfortable. Our facility is located, isn't it, in the town of Rochdale, but it's within about 6 miles of the city.
And as a hazardous waste landfill, obviously this is something that you guys do all the time and deal with, that you're used to taking this in. So where we see this as a really big thing, this is something you do all the time?
Correct. As Ali mentioned, we went into operation in 1981. So it's been over 40 years of taking materials into the facility and making sure those toxic chemicals aren't getting out into the environment.
So I think the distinction is while this was obviously a very big event in Ohio, the material that's being generated from that event is very low level of contaminants, the material that's coming here. So for us, it's kind of our everyday business, even though the event that generated the material in this particular case was something out of the ordinary.
Will this be the material's permanent home if it is approved?
Yes.
And then has there been more communication? The governor had put out a statement that he didn't know about a lot of this going on and happening, and he was very concerned about these contaminants traveling from one side of Ohio all the way across Indiana. Has there been any more talk on that?
I think when you have situations, emergency response situations, often communications get tangled up. We've been in contact with local representatives, the U.S. representative here, as well as the governor's office and the IDEM commissioner. So we think at least we've done our part in that particular instance.
And as far as the transportation of the hazardous waste, that's also a regulated industry. So all the equipment used to transport it has to meet the specifications, the DOT specifications to haul that type of material.
There have been any talks with the town of Russellville, given that I know it's Rochdale address, but Russellville is obviously much closer.
I have not talked with the town of Russellville yet. It was only with the town of Rochdale.
What about the Putnam County Health Department? They're also expressing some concerns about this. Have you heard from them or reached out to them?
No, we have not.
We have not.
You mentioned, to put this in perspective, it's about 1 cup of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
That would be 1 part per million.
1 part per
And
million.
so the level of what's acceptable of the vinyl chloride, for example, in that material is 6 parts per million.
Mhm.
And what the material is being, the analytical results are coming back at 0.033 parts per million.
So how do you make residents feel comfortable, right? Because they have their eyes on Ohio and just the thought of the word toxic, right? Materials coming here. How do you address their?
Well, I think you have to look at sort of the exposure scenarios there. I mean, that material was out in the open, it spilled out into the environment. Then they did the controlled burn, I think, which led to the billowing clouds of the black smoke. Here the material is cordoned off and sequestered and covered in a double-line, heavily regulated unit. So there is no exposure to the material here. And, which basically tells me it's really the environmentally responsible thing to do, bringing the material here.
Once contaminated, always contaminated? I mean, is there a breakdown process, or is it always going to be contaminated material?
It will likely always be contaminated material because I suspect and I don't know the chemistry specifically about the breakdown products of the constituents in this soil, but it's like, the definition of hazardous substance under environmental law is extremely broad. Cooking oil, for example. So, yeah, I would suspect that it would still be considered contaminated. But again, it's sequestered inside that landfill and, completely covered and protected, and doubly so from the bottom.
What sort of precautions are there when it's out on the road? Because obviously, I'd say that maybe potentially the bigger risk is actually when it's rolling down the highway and coming through the communities. So what are the precautions that are in place with the actual vehicles?
Well, the vehicles are all licensed and permitted under DOT and EPA regulations. So they have to meet stringent requirements to be able to carry that material. And so it'll be a mix of, Heritage Transport, one of our companies, as well as a handful of third-party transportation companies, all licensed and permitted in the same manner.
And Kelly, would you mind doing us a favor and coming to the podium and having a little bit of
Sure.
time in everything?
I don't think I've ever been told I'm too quiet.
So again, you were just assuring, the transportation from.
Correct, yeah. So again, the trucks and the modes of transportation are all permitted and licensed under DOT and EPA regulations.
Will those be coming in like open air trucks or will they be covered?
They'll be covered.
So is there any particular reason why it's coming here to Indiana? Is there samples being sent out across the country, or is it?
Yeah, we're not the only facility that'll be receiving this material. It's being received in a number of different locations. There's some material that's generated, for example, the water that's captured from the firefighting aspect of the emergency response. That would not be coming here. That'll be going to multiple locations. Some of it will be deep well injected at permitted facilities that don't belong to us, or taken to hazardous waste incinerators, of which we own one in eastern Ohio that's about 20 miles from the derailment site.
No, but you guys are a private business. You're in the business of making money. So did you guys bid to take this material?
We did.
And that, I'm sure that bid process, you were competing against other companies that do very similar things as you guys do.
That's correct. Now, as you might expect, one of the more costly pieces of projects like this is the transportation to get the material from where it's generated to where its final resting place is. So from an economic perspective and also from a safety perspective, to your point about material being on the road, the less time it's on the road, the better, from a cost and a safety perspective.
Do you guys also oversee the transportation process? Will it be your trucks bringing it, or is that?
It'll be a mixed bag. Some of them will be ours, but there'll be a handful of third-party, similarly licensed and permitted trucking companies that'll be moving the material.
How many days would it take to get 100 truckloads worth of material from there to here?
Well, I honestly don't know.
What was the interest in applying for that bid?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the main thing is we've got the facility that's able to handle that material. Actually, two of them, our incinerator in Ohio and our landfill here. And they're both, within striking distance of that location. There's an impetus for, the folks to get that material off-site as quickly as possible. And, we're able to accommodate that and help, so.
Will some of the material also be headed to that facility in Ohio?
Yes.
Do you know about how much percentage-wise is headed here or there?
I don't know, but the thing is, it's a mixed bag, because there are other facilities that don't belong to Heritage that are also receiving the material, or various materials from the site.
And have you guys worked closely with the Putnam County commissioners before on bringing in things like this?
Yeah, we work with them closely, I think, on a regular basis, and Eric would probably be best able to speak to that, but I think we've had a long-standing good relationship with the folks in the county.
Not trying to scare anybody who lives here, but have there been other materials that are actually more contaminated brought into the facility and kept in these double-lined storage areas without any incidents before?
Yes, I mean, there's material that comes in that has higher, levels of constituents in the soil or in the material. Some of that material will have to go to our Indianapolis treatment plant for treatment first, before it's, then from there, it's able to meet the EPA standards to be able to place in the landfill.
This is just another job for you guys, the only difference is the attention?
I guess that's one way of putting it, yes. But I don't want to downplay, the importance to the folks in Ohio at all.
But it's fair to say this level of contamination is not out of the ordinary for what you handle here.
No, not at all.
Anything else you'd like to add? Anything else we might be missing?
I don't think so. I think we've covered the waterfront.
Commissioners, do you guys want to weigh in also?
I'd say that we do have a monitor.
Yeah. if you-
We do have an individual that monitors the wells up there, and he reports quarterly to the Board of Health in this county with the reports. So I feel they've been good community partners over the years, and have, to my knowledge, never had an issue.
So hearing what he has to say, do you feel comfortable that the community will be safe?
Yes.
Will you first tell me your first and last name and what district you represent?
Thomas Helmer at District 3 at Cloverdale.
Is District 3
Area.
the district that's that area?
No, it's District 1. So
Have you guys heard concerns from your constituents as far as this? Obviously, it has been made bigger attention, so have you heard more from this than other things?
yes, we've like I said, I didn't find out about it until Sunday night, but yesterday with the phone was quite interesting. And there's worries.
What were some of the things that you've heard?
The biggest thing was the well field for Bainbridge. It's west of Roachdale, and like I said, what I understand is everything's buried in that landfill is got a rubber membrane before it goes down into it. And like I said, to my knowledge, we've never had an issue.
So if you're comfortable with this, what are some of the things that you've been telling those people who reach out with their concerns?
Listen to EPA, listen to the people at the landfill that I think we're, like I said, it's being monitored by Putnam County. They're being reported, the reports going to the local Board of Health, and everything's up to standards.
Would this require more oversight because of the materials coming from Ohio, or do you all fall in line with the same level of oversight? How it's been in the past?
No, there would be no difference.
Okay.
I mean, again, the programs that we operate under are so stringent that there's not a lot of room to be more stringent at this point.
Myself and our employees that work there are also part of the community. I would live within a mile of the landfill.
You're the podium monitor.
So, both myself and our employees that work at the landfill are also part of this community. Everybody lives either in Putnam or Hendricks County. I live within a mile of the landfill. My home site has a freshwater well, and I have no concerns about anything leaching out of the landfill because of the way it's designed, monitored, and upkept.
To be honest, because of the public outcry, this is the reason why you're having this press conference today. Obviously, well below the levels of the stuff that you normally take in. So this is more just to kind of reassure the public that everything is, on below board, if you will.
Correct.
Or
Yeah.
above board.
Above board. Yes.
I think above, I guess.
There's been a lot of coverage on the situation over in Ohio, and they talk about potential contamination of groundwaters. But at the site, and there is no type of protection at the site. It's just sitting above ground where rain can run on it and run the contaminants off of site into waterways. versus like we mentioned before, our site is specifically designed to handle type of material, prevent it from ever getting out into the environment.
You see yourself as part of the solution here?
We do. That is part of our motto, is we want to be solutions people, you know, to help protect human health and the environment.
And it's gotta go someplace.
Correct.
Do we have District 1 Commissioner in the House? Would you like to come up and say your area?
That's basically like what Tom and Eric said. Heritage has been a great neighbor and help to the county through all these, I think it's like, what, 41 years. And they've been great to work with, no issues. This is my 11th year as commissioner, and we review the test that an independent neighbor up there, we have a local man tested. Results are fine. We've never had an issue. Just never have. As far as complaints or concerns, yes. And I think it's basically people, it's the unknown. Okay, this, you know, they all know Heritage Hall's in there all the time, but this is something new. It's you know, it's kind of scared. So this is great, you folks being here and the folks from Heritage being here to explain it. I think it'll ease people's minds.
What were the thoughts that you had when you first got that phone call, maybe Sunday night, when you first learned that some of these materials were coming here to your backyard and to your constituents' backyard?
What I think?
Yeah, what did you think when you initially got the news, and then when you started to learn more about the process of how they...
Well, I was comfortable with it because I know how they operate. So I was comfortable with that material coming here, knowing that it's going to be handled properly, instead of, like they said, just, you know, laying in a ditch and letting it percolate in the ground and eventually leaks into somebody's water. It won't do that here.
And will you tell us your first and last
Oh,
name?
David Berry. Thanks, folks.